Hey there, and welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to look at something, well, it's a completely different way to build web servers in TypeScript. We're going to unpack Effect's HttpLayerRouter, which is all about a huge shift in thinking, building your apps with blueprints instead of a list of instructions. All right, let's dive right in. Before we even touch any code, we really need to wrap our heads around a fundamental change in philosophy. This isn't just some new library with a different syntax. It's a whole new way of thinking about what routing even is. You know how it usually works, right? You grab a router object and you start bossing it around. Hey, router, add this get route, or use this middleware. It's imperative. You're giving commands. The layer model just flips that completely on its head. Instead of giving orders, you are writing a blueprint. You declaratively describe what the final application should look like, piece by piece. And the best part? It's immutable. Every new description you add doesn't change what you already have. It just creates a plan for a new, more complete version of your app. So, how does this whole blueprint thing actually work? Well, it all comes down to one really powerful central concept from the Effect ecosystem, something called a layer. And that, of course, brings up the million-dollar question, right? What on earth is a layer? What are we really talking about when we say we're building our application as a blueprint? Okay, think of a layer like, the instruction manual for flat-pack furniture. It has two key parts. First, a list of all the pieces you'll need, your dependencies, and second, the step-by-step assembly instructions. Now, here's the crucial bit. Just reading the manual doesn't magically build the bookshelf. It's just the plan. It's a complete description of how it will be built later on. Maybe an even better analogy is a recipe. A recipe is perfect. First, you list all your ingredients. Those are your dependencies, like a database connection or a logger. Then you write out the instructions, how you actually combine those ingredients to make the dish. That's your logic. The whole thing, the ingredients and the instructions all packaged up, that's your layer, a perfect reusable recipe you can share and combine with others. And this really gets to the heart of the mental shift. As a developer, your job changes. You're not the line cook executing orders one by one. You're the head chef designing the entire menu. You create these rich, detailed descriptions of the final dishes, and you let the Effect runtime act as your kitchen staff, flawlessly executing your plan. Okay, theory is great, but let's make this way more concrete. How does this whole blueprint idea actually work when we're doing the most basic task of a web server, just defining a couple of routes? So take a look at this. On the left, that's what we're all used to. You call .get on a router object and boom, you've just changed that object forever. You've mutated it. But on the right, that HttpLayerRouter.add function, it doesn't change a thing. Instead, it just hands you back a brand new value, a tiny self-contained blueprint that simply says, hey, at some point in the future, we're going to need a get route for /users. So the system gives you these helper functions, these little blueprint factories like add and addAll. And because they just create these blueprints, which are really just values, you can start snapping them together like Lego bricks. You can take your user routes blueprint and combine it with your product routes blueprint. You can even create a bigger blueprint that says, take this whole collection of routes and stick them all under an API v1 prefix. It's all just about composing descriptions. Okay, defining individual routes with blueprints, that's cool. But where this whole declarative approach really starts to shine is when you scale up to define an entire API. This is where you get some actual superpowers, like getting your documentation for free. This all happens through a module called HttpApi. And the idea here is to describe the complete shape, the entire contract of your API before you even think about writing the logic that makes it work. So what does that really mean? It means you are describing the whole shebang, not just the endpoint path, but the exact shape of the inputs, URL params, request bodies, you name it. You define the precise structure of a successful response. You even declare every single possible error that this endpoint could return. You're basically writing the constitution for your API before it's even born. And here is where the magic happens. Because you took the time to create such a precise, detailed blueprint of your API, the system can now do some amazing things for you, automatically. You get two huge wins from this single definition without writing a single extra line of code. First, there's a function called addHttpApi. You feed it your API blueprint, and it spits out another layer, a blueprint for a fully functional, running, and completely type-safe API. But, and this is the absolute killer feature, if you give that same function one tiny little option, an open API path, it also adds another route to your server that automatically serves up a complete and accurate open API specification. One definition, two incredible outputs. That is a massive win. And what's so elegant about this is that the pattern just keeps going. This idea of creating descriptive blueprints isn't just for routes. It applies to everything else, from middleware to the final step of actually launching the server. It really is layers all the way down. You need some middleware? You guessed it. You create another layer. You can create a small middleware layer that only gets composed with a few specific routes. Or you can use a helper like addGlobalMiddleware to create a layer that describes applying some logic, like a logger, to every single route in the entire application. It's still just composing blueprints. So how does it all come together in the end? Well, once you've composed all your individual blueprints for routes, APIs, middleware, into one final master blueprint for your app, you hand that off to the serve function. Think of serve as the general contractor. It takes your final plans, assembles the entire application, and then flips the switch to start the server. So after going through all that, you have to ask the big question, why does any of this matter? What are the real, tangible benefits of building our web applications this way? Well, when you build with blueprints, the payoff is huge. Your app is naturally modular, built from these small, reusable pieces. This makes testing an absolute dream because each piece can be tested in total isolation. TypeScript can check your entire dependency graph at compile time, which just wipes out a whole class of runtime errors. And maybe best of all, you can build incredibly complex systems just by snapping together these simpler, well-defined blueprints. Which leaves us with a final big idea to think about. This whole declarative, composition-based approach, where we build software by assembling blueprints rather than giving step-by-step instructions, is this the future of how we'll design all complex systems? It's a powerful idea to chew on.